Good afternoon and welcome to Willow's Green Permaculture. My name is Stephen Dixon, and today I'd like to talk to you about the do's and the don'ts of planting the Three Sisters. We're in the middle of the summer, and so I'm going to be able to show you a bunch of the results of things. If you do them well, how's it going to look? And maybe if you make a few mistakes, whatever, how's it going to look? Like right behind me here, this is an example of that I did on purpose of some of the don'ts of growing the Three Sisters. And I'm also going to talk to you about how to inoculate your corn with Huitlacoche, the famous Mexican truffle or corn fungus, as well as the best time to harvest your corn for the juicy stage, the stage to eat it fresh, and also how to harvest your beans so you can get the most beans possible. So if this is something you're interested in, then let's get started. Now I have lots of videos which show you lots of footage of how our Three Sisters are doing, like the ones that are doing really well. I'm sure you've seen some of them. But here's one I want to show you that, well, some of the stuff's doing real well here anyway, but there's certain things here that are going on that you kind of want to avoid in the future. And so I'll give you an idea just by looking at that bean, those pole beans there, and also the fact that there seems to be something missing here. So these Three Sisters, well, it's actually there, but there's something missing here, and I think you can guess it. These Three Sisters I planted on May 29th. Correction, it was actually May 25th. So I'm going to plant the corns, beans, and squash all at the same time. I'm going to do that right now. It's May 25th today, so it's a bit early for me as far as the beans and the squash are concerned. I don't usually do those until at the very least the 31st of May. However, we'll see how things go. And you notice the beans and corn are all different colors and sizes, but I did it differently than you should do it on purpose because some people had asked me this question, or I've seen videos showing people explaining the Three Sisters, and they're saying, yeah, the Three Sisters, you plant your beans, your corn, and your squash, and then they showed planting them, and they planted them all at the same time. But you don't want to plant your corn, your beans, and your squash all at the same time because they're not going to grow well if you do that. And here is an example of having planted them all at the same time. So let's have a look. What you see here are two plants of Queensland blue squash, and you see some pole beans, a whole bunch of types of pole beans. However, what you don't see much of here is the corn. It's actually it's actually growing. I think there's either 2 stalks or 3. No, I think I see 3 stalks there. 3 corn stalks. 1 right here, 2 and 3. They're tiny. Of course they're tiny because I planted all this stuff at the same time. When you're doing the Three Sisters, you got to plant your corn first. And you can't plant anything else until that corn has sprouted and has grown, I would say, at least 10 centimeters or 4 inches. Once it's started to do that, then you can plant your squash. And then once your squash has sprouted, then you can plant your beans. Roughly what we're talking about here is roughly a week apart, maybe a week and a half apart. The most important step is that corn. It's got to start growing. I actually, when I was talking about this to a class when I used to be a teacher, one of my students said to me afterwards when I was saying like about doing it about a week apart, my student, she was a grade 8 student, I think, or grade 7. She came up to me and she said, my grandfather said that your corn has to be up, I think if I recall correctly, it's got to be chest high before you plant your beans. And you know what? That's probably a very good point. Because the thing is, if your corn is going to be your only bean support, then you want it to be good and high before you plant your beans onto it. Otherwise, the beans are just going to pull it down. You want it to be good and strong. However, I don't do it that way. If your corn is going to be your only bean support, then you can only plant maybe one bean plant at the base of that corn, or maybe two. More than that, and it's gonna pull your corn down if it's your only support. Now, because I like to grow a lot of beans, I do the teepee thing. Now, here's number 2, don't. Look at this teepee. Let me stand right beside it. Actually, here, let me prop the phone up. I don't even think you can see the top of it. Well, you can see how tall it is. It's crazy. This is way too tall for me to be able to take care of it. Look at what's going on up there. Normally, when your beans start to do that, when they've grown past the top, you want to clip the top. You want to clip it, and when you clip the tops, then it's going to start to grow side shoots all along the vine from the bottom to the top, and you're going to get a thicker vine, and then you're going to get more beans. The deer taught us that, because they did that once to our beans without us doing it before we learned how to do it. So the deer actually taught us a lesson. It was a really well appreciated lesson. That's how we learned about it, and then I researched it afterwards. So yeah, what's going to happen with that is that's going to get heavy with beans, which I can't even reach. I'm going to have to get up on a step ladder if I want to harvest any of those beans. And if I don't do it, then that's eventually going to break up top, and it's going to fall, and the whole thing's going to fall down. And here's another thing that wasn't done well here on purpose. If you look at the teepee, how narrow it is. Those 2 new pieces of wood you see right here aren't part of the original teepee. I just added those yesterday, just before doing the video. I didn't put my, in the main, our other teepees, the base of the teepee is a lot wider. This base is a lot narrower and taller at the same time. The taller your teepee is, the wider it should be. You can do a big tall teepee like this if you don't mind getting up on a ladder, or if you don't mind your beans ripening early. Because the thing is, if I don't get at those beans and they ripen, then they dry early, then the whole plant's going to shut down maybe before I want it to. Because what I like to do is, I like to harvest my beans when they're green and fresh for fresh eating in the kitchen in the summer, let's say, right up until the end of August. And then afterwards, whatever beans are still growing, I'm going to let them grow until, let's say, October, mid-October and so on. Let them dry on the vine, and then I have beans like little beans, like hard beans, whatever. English doesn't have 2 different, you have green beans and beans, whatever. Beans for making baked beans, in the wintertime. Those are the ones that, starting in September, I'll let those grow. But up until the end of August, I like to harvest my beans green. Well, if I get beans that ripen and dry before the end of August, then the whole plant will shut down, and I won't be able to get as many beans out of it. The more beans you pick, the more you get, as long as you got season, obviously. And so this teepee, in a big, huge wind, could easily fall over because it's too narrow. So be careful about that. It's too tall. I can't reach the top unless I get on a step ladder. You want to look at those beans. See these beans right there? They're ready to harvest for fresh eating. If I let them grow anymore, they're going to start bulging in the middle, and they're going to start wanting to dry. And look at those way up there. Well, those are still nice and tender. I don't need to, but look at that one way up there. That's like almost, yeah, it's like 3 meters up. It's almost 10 feet up. I can't reach that. And so I want to be able to pick those. I'm going to have to get onto a step ladder and pick them. So far, first, don't plant them all at the same time. At least a week to a week and a half apart. First your corn, then your squash, then your beans. This year I did it. I also did something that I don't normally do. I did first the corn, then the beans, then the squash, because I waited up until, in most of the other areas, not here, but in our other areas, I waited until mid-June before I planted my squash, because I was tired of fighting with the cucumber beetles and so on. So by mid-June there aren't as many. But that wasn't such a great idea in areas where I had a lot of vegetation. And I'll show you why right here. So these two squash plants are doing really well because they were planted early and they had lots of time. And I'm happy about that because this area doesn't get a ton of light. This area only gets 6 hours of light a day of sunlight, of direct sunlight. Now, however, because I was doing this testing, once again, this squash and the corn and these beans I planted all at the same time. And so the resulting problem was the corn that basically is not going to produce. It's far too shaded out. I'd have to remove a whole bunch of these beans. But now, because I wanted to demonstrate more than that, the same time as I planted the squash in the other gardens, I planted some squash here to show you what happens if you also plant your squash too late. So let me show you. Let's get in a little closer. And you can see right there are a couple of squash plants. You can see the base right there. These are zucchinis, I think. But they didn't grow very well. Why? Because they're just totally shaded out by the beans. So if you plant your squash too late and there's too much vegetation around it, it's not going to grow much. It's not going to have, and so that's something else you need to be careful of. And so that's why I recommend that you plant your corn first, your squash second, and your beans last. Beans, they grow super fast. Almost you can plant them, practically a month later, and they'll still grow. However, you don't want to do that. Let's get back to the example of that student who quoted her grandfather, who's saying the corn has to be this tall. The problem with waiting for the corn to be this tall before you plant your beans or whatever is when it's that tall and it's completely exposed, it's going to attract the animals. Whereas the beans will tend to hide it when they start to grow. And so you plant your corn first, you wait till it's a good 10 centimeters tall, 4 inches tall, then you plant your squash. And you plant them, at least 1.5 feet outside of where your corn is planted, and you surround the corn with it completely. But you give it space. You put it on the outside of your hill. And I'll show you examples in a minute. And so when your squash starts to grow, and it grows quickly and it grows big, well, it's far enough away from the corn, it's not going to be a problem for it. You can also make sure you direct it away from the corn. And because maybe you're still planting it before, let's say, mid-June, then plant extra squash seeds. Direct sow as well. With corns, beans, and squash, all three of them you can direct sow in the ground. You do not have to start them ahead of time. The corn you can start mid to end May, depending on where you are. I'm in zone 6B. Correction, I'm in zone 5B, 6A. Sort of on the edge between two zones. Mid to end of May is good. And so basically mid-May is ideal for the corn. And then a week and a half later, we're talking maybe in the last week of May, that's when you can plant your squash. And in the first week of June, after any danger of frost is gone, that's when you can plant your beans. Your beans you want to plant after all danger of frost is gone. Well, actually, the same thing with your squash too, because a frost would kill your young squash plants. But a frost won't necessarily, a mild frost won't kill your corn. It's best, however, to avoid a frost for all three. That's why, let's say, in my zones, the frosts are rare after mid-May. They're usually very light if they are, so the corn can handle it. Then towards the end of May, the squash, because there's very unlikely going to be a frost. If there is, maybe I might cover them up, or maybe they haven't sprouted yet, so they're fine. And then the first week of June, when pretty well the dangers of frost are all gone, that's when I sow my beans. And by that time, the corn should be a good maybe almost 15 centimeters or like 6 inches tall. What I forgot to mention a minute ago are these three stakes here. This one is a piece of Manitoba maple, and these two stakes I just added today as a bit of an extra support. But I need something a lot taller than that to support that up there. I'm gonna see if I can find something. Maybe go find a dead tree somewhere with a fairly thick trunk and see if I can support that, because it's way too high. I just added this today. So the actual teepee is just right here, these three. And while I'm at it, let me do a review of what's good for your squash vines to prevent them from squash vine borer problems. You see how I've covered the vine with this leaf mulch. I'm encouraging the vine to grow new roots at the base of each leaf, or at the base of each leaf node. Down there too, I'm doing it here too. These are pieces of jewelweed plant that I pulled up. Basically cover up the vine. Here you can see the leaf nodes at the base. And so they'll grow roots in those spots. When they can grow roots, they'll also, apart from just growing a straight vine, they'll grow side shoots, like that one going that way and this one going this way. So this is the main vine coming out here, and it goes this way. And then I had it turn this way because I didn't want it going towards the forest. But then it started to turn more towards the greenhouse. But in the meantime, it's got these other side shoots that are growing out. See, there's one, and there's another one. And of course, this is another one right here, coming all the way across. And that's another one right there that went back towards the fence and then went through the fence. And then over here, this vine, which is a little smaller, I think it gets a little less sunlight because it's closer to the house. Well, it's got one little side shoot coming out of it. No, actually, this is the side shoot that's coming out of that one over there. This one hasn't developed side shoots yet. And because you want your vine to grow new roots at its leaf nodes so that it's protected from the squash vine borer, and so that it just becomes a stronger vine, then you don't want to be planting your squash sort of in a hole inside of all sorts of black landscaping fabric or black plastic or any other kind of, let's say, ground sort of weed cover that's, you know, that basically roots wouldn't be able to grow through. I often see squash fields where there's all this black landscaping fabric or black plastic on the ground, and the vines are growing on top of that. Well, they're never going to be able to grow roots through that. And so the vines are going to be extremely vulnerable to the vine borer, to drought, and so on, because they're not going to be able to grow those extra roots. They're also going to be vulnerable to heat. It heats up a whole lot on top of that type of landscaping fabric or the black plastic. You can see right here that this vine is growing right on top of the grass. And so, you know, while the vine's there, we're just going to stop cutting the grass and we're just going to let it do what it wants to do, so long as the squash vine has taken over the area. The area now belongs to the squash. Now here's the other thing. So it's August 3rd today, and I'm getting my first female pumpkin flowers. This has already been pollinated and it's already closed up. There's another one right there. It's also, it looks like it's probably already been pollinated and it's closing up. August 3rd, these are my first two in this area. And actually, in most of the pumpkin patch, I'm only just starting to get the female flowers now. I've had about 8 zucchinis, I think, 8 small zucchinis. So the zucchinis are just 3 plants that were a little faster than everybody else, but most everybody else is only just starting to put out their female flowers now. And why is that? Because I've had some people ask me, is it too late for the pumpkins? We're already in August and I only have male flowers and I don't have any, or I don't have that many female flowers. The thing is, the pumpkin and squash are going to put out lots of male flowers first. Why is that? It's because they want to start attracting the bees and all the other pollinators. They want them to get used to being around, for a few days, a week, maybe even 2 weeks. Why? Because it's a lot easier for a pumpkin plant to put out the male flowers, a lot less energy than it takes to put out the female flowers, because the male flowers is just a stem and the flower, but whereas the female flowers, it's the stem and then it's the base of the fruit, which probably takes a lot of energy to produce, and then the flower. And so it takes a lot more energy. The plant doesn't want to waste energy, so it's going to get the bugs all revved up and ready to go and all set and ready to go, so that when the female flowers come, and there'll be more male flowers at the time, the bugs will already be there and ready. They'll go to the male flowers, they'll go to the female flowers, and back and forth and back and forth. And that's how the plant's going to save its energy. That's actually not something I've ever read anywhere. No one's ever explained that to me. But to me, it just makes sense. If I were a pumpkin plant, if I were born as a pumpkin plant instead of a human being, you know, we always want babies. And for to have my babies, I'm dependent on bees. I'm going to want to make sure those bees and other insects are around. So that's what I'm going to do as the pumpkin plant parent who wants to make babies. Anyway. Here's a better spacing for your three sisters. Keep a good 4 feet, at least 4 to 8 feet between your mounds, so that your squash has a lot of room to grow. Now here, because on this south side of our pumpkin patch, you know, there was a risk of the beans shading everything out. I didn't put any beans here, so there's just corn and squash. However, everywhere else, as you can see, we've got the squash pretty well everywhere, and then the corn and the beans. And so there's a good amount of space you can see between these two towers here, and between them you've got all the squash growing. And the corn is mostly hidden now by the beans, which means the raccoons have no idea it's there. And then we have other stuff growing in there like yarrow and mustard and sunflowers to distract all the animals. With all this extra space, the squash does really, really well. Almost looks tropical in here. And yet we're in Ontario, half an hour north of Lake Ontario in zone 6B. Sorry, I mean in zone 5B. We're zone 5B here, 6A. I was having a fixation with zone 6B yesterday. It must be remnants of the very long and very cold winter we had this year. Anyway, we're the next day now, and today I'm going to talk to you about inoculating your corn with Huitlacoche or Mexican truffles. And also I'm going to talk to you a little bit about harvesting your corn and harvesting your beans so that you can get as many beans as possible, and that's so you can know when your corn is ready for harvesting at, let's say, the milk stage, the juicy stage, the stage for eating fresh. I was just preparing an order of Huitlacoche Mexican truffle mushrooms, the corn mushroom, for a customer on our seed catalog, and I thought, it's time I did some inoculating of our corn as well. So I still have some left. I'm gonna update the site too. I'll put a little bit in water here, and I'm just mixing it. Mixing it in water, and then I'm just gonna, it's best if you use a syringe or a spray bottle. I'm not gonna do either. I'm just gonna pour a little bit. So I have my mix of spores and water, and now I'm just gonna pour it over, pour a little bit over these, this silk here. It can actually grow on the silk. It can grow on the tassels. That's way too high though. And it can even grow on the stem. And it can grow obviously on the cob. So let's just pour a little bit over top of these tassels. There we go. Now you see it's fallen onto the leaves, some of the solids there, and it's fallen onto the tassels. And so it's gonna, you know, with wind and stuff and the little insects and so on, they're also gonna spread that around the plant, because that's what I'd like to see happen. I don't want to use a spray bottle or a syringe because I have chunks in there, and because I don't want to waste any of it. I want to use the chunks as well. If you want to use a spray bottle or or a syringe, then you should not put the chunks into your liquid. Here's another little corn cob here. There we go. Let's pour it over. Here, I'm going to pour them over these tassels. And it's going to slide down the whole stalk. There we go. As you can see, it's sliding down the stalk all the way down to here's a little tiny corn cob that's starting to form. This is one of these side shoots, a small side shoot. I'm going to pour some into this there's a little kind of leaf node here. It should catch some of it. I can see how a spray bottle would be probably a lot better use for this. However, there we go. But you see where it's being caught in the bases of the leaves. The Huitlacoche can grow anywhere. It can grow there, it can grow here, it can grow here. It can grow absolutely anywhere on the plant. Now, one of the most common examples of corn that I've seen the Huitlacoche growing on is the ones with the burgundy stalks, like that one there you see over there. However, I've seen it grow on other types of corn as well, but I've most often harvested off of the burgundy stalked corn, which is my Seneca red stalk corn. And now for the bean and the corn harvest, and to show you another section where we have the Three Sisters, where the squash also could have done a little better, and why. This Three Sister patch, the corn and the beans are doing wonderfully. They are huge. They're over 3 meters or over 10 feet tall. In fact, I'd say they're that particular teepee there is closer to 4 meters or almost 13 feet tall. However, because like I said, I planted the squash this time around instead of second the squash here, because there's just so much vegetation in my main garden, you know, with these peppers here and the rhubarb over there, the Three Sisters being so huge, the potatoes on this side, the garlic that was over there, now it's a buckwheat, so the squash has not grown as well in here. So it's not doing as good a job of protecting our corn as it is in our pumpkin patch. However, I'm very happy with this Three Sisters patch anyway because of the corn and the beans. And I'm happy with this squash too. It's going to give us some squash, just not as much. Now here's something you need to be careful of. This corn cob here looks like it's ripe because the silks are brown and brittle. However, let's take a close look at this cob. You know, I'm going to touch it and I squeeze it just a little bit. And as I come near the top, right near the top here, it just doesn't feel, actually, you know what? I felt this yesterday and it felt more pointy, but now I'm feeling the top and it feels a little bit more bulged out. This end, of course, is pointy, but this is all pure silk, I think. This actually might be right because as I feel the top, rather than tapering to a point, if I squeeze a little, I don't think it's pointed. I think it's more rounded. If it's rounded and swollen, then you know it's ripe. And actually, this silk is really, really brittle and brown. So maybe this might be ripe. There's a way I can test it. I'll show you. Here's another cob, and you can see the silk isn't brittle and brown yet. And actually, in this case, the kernels are showing through a little, and you can see they're not mature yet. And they come to a point here. They're not rounded. And when it's ripe, this end is going to be rounded rather than coming to a point. And so now I'm trying to feel this to feel what the other one should feel like being covered in leaves. So I'm going to go back to it in a sec. You see, this seems to be the end of the cob right here. And this all seems to be empty. So I'm thinking this might be ripe. I might just take a risk and just open this slightly and see. Now I can't do this one-handed, so I'm gonna have to put the phone down and then open it, and then I'll show you. I've opened it only very slightly, and I can see that the tassels, I meant to say the silk, are still very, very fresh. So this corn is not ripe. So not gonna open it any more than that. I'm not gonna expose the kernels. Just let this finish ripening. However, I might put some Huitlacoche spores on this. Another cob, I'm gonna put some Huitlacoche spores on. I've got a little bit left. I'm just gonna put them on these tassels right here. There we go. I wonder why I did it this way instead of using what's recommended, a spray bottle or a syringe. Now I mentioned the chunks, that's one. Now I could have easily just removed the chunks and just used the powder, just used the spores in a spray bottle or in a syringe. However, I already expect to get some Huitlacoche from our corn cobs this year because I get a little bit every year. I'll be watching for it. And so with this, I'm doing an experiment in that I'm going to see if it works this way too. You know, if I was afraid that I wouldn't get any Huitlacoche, I would have only used a spray bottle or a syringe. But because I already expect to get some Huitlacoche because we have a lot of corn growing, then I thought, well, let's try and push the envelope and see if this works too. Here's a small harvest of beans with two of our varieties. You can see it's mostly one variety of this mottled colored bean pod, where it's mostly green with a little bit of purple stripes on it. Later in the season there'll be more purple stripes. The purple pole beans, of which you see two here, they start they're a little bit slower starters, and so we'll be getting more of those later. These are scarlet runner bean blooms. They're the slowest of them all. They'll be developing a lot later and likely won't be ready for tender harvest until the end of August, and then obviously dried beans probably not until October. Now, if you want to get lots of green beans, then you want to keep picking them. You can even pick them when they're tiny and tender, like there's, you can see a real small green one right there. They're really nice when they're that small, very, very nice flavor. But even up to this size, they're really good. They don't have any strings in them or whatever. But then if you look at this curved one right here, you can see it's starting to get a bulge there. So that's when they start to get bulgy, they also start to get a little bit fibrous, some kinds, where you have to pull a string out of them if you don't want to be chewing on it. And the other thing is, when they start to get, it's important to harvest them at this point at the latest to avoid them producing ripe beans inside, because when they do that, once they've produced ripe beans, and if those beans get a chance to dry up, then your whole vine will shut down for the season, because it will have produced its babies, it will be satisfied, and it will shut down. And if you don't want it to shut down early, then make sure you get these beans. I've said my rule of thumb is I harvest the green beans right up until the end of August, and then after that, the rest of them, I let them dry. I hope you liked the video. I hope you learned something from it and you found it enjoyable. If you liked it, then please give it the thumbs up and share it with your friends. Share it with lots of your friends. And if you have a question or comment, don't forget to leave a question or a comment. You know that I answer them all. And I'm going to give you a little reminder again that I have started to do coaching in 15-minute segments. What do I mean by that? What I mean is you can do a coaching session with me for as little as 15 minutes, or you can do it for half an hour, an hour and a half. Obviously, the price goes down as the length lengthens. And we can do this over the phone, over the internet, sort of make like through Zoom or whatever, or through WhatsApp over the phone. You can be anywhere in the world, and we can do it in English, we can do it in French, we can do it in Spanish, and you know what? I'd also be willing to do it in other languages. I'd probably just add 5 minutes to each 15-minute segment to allow for the time it takes to do like Google Translate and so on, so that we can actually communicate with each other. So there's a thought. You can find the link to our website in the description of this video, and you just look under our seed catalog, and it's basically under shop. It's one of the categories under shop. It's called coaching. Thank you very much for watching. Have a wonderful week, and we will see you next time.
We don't